Hello and welcome to another HRAI webinar. My name is Matthew Bradford, your host as usual. Today we are proud and happy to welcome back two folks who are going to talk to us about succession planning in HVAC and leaving your legacy. And they are Kaylie Chamberlin and Spencer Ross with MechCan Inc. And I will invite them to turn on their camera right now. There they are.
Hello.
In an undisclosed hotel somewhere in North America, here to here to answer your succession planning questions. How are you guys today?
Great. How are you?
I'm excellent. So we're going to do something kind of fun today. It is a virtual fireside chat. So we got these two fine people over here. We're here to kind of ask themselves some questions about succession planning, but also open up the floor to the people watching this as well. So if you have questions about succession planning, please, you'll see at the bottom of your screen, there is a Q&A button and also a chat button. You can put them in there and I will pop on and read them to Kaylie and Spencer. Also, too, at the end of the presentation, they'll give up their contact information. So if you're watching this after the fact, they'll be more than happy to take your follow-up questions there. I think that's all I have for housekeeping notes. So why don't you guys get the conversation started? I'm going to be in the background collecting questions, and I'll pop on when I got a few.
Awesome. Thanks for that.
Awesome.
So
Thank you.
I'm Spencer Ross. I'm a co-founder of MechCan. For those of you who may be unfamiliar, MechCan is a proudly Canadian acquirer of and partner to HVAC, plumbing, and electrical contractors across the country. We started in January of 2022 and have completed 8 transactions since our founding. 6 in Ontario and 2 in BC. Most recently, completed an acquisition on Vancouver Island. So very proud of what we're building. We're a very mission-oriented company. So our goal is to help keep the Canadian residential skilled trades Canadian, help maintain the local family business feel of our HVAC contractor community. So really give those local family businesses the resources of a larger national player, but without disrupting you can actually reach someone in the branch, you actually can know your technician, and really get that same sort of family local business feel. So that's what we're about, and that's what we've been going about doing. And my co-fireside panelist is
Also, I want to point out the nice fire that we have here. But anyway, Kaylie Chamberlin. So I'm the director of business development with MechCan. I've been in the industry essentially my whole life. I was raised in the business. My parents owned a plumbing and heating company in the small town where I grew up. And I have done everything from sell at the kitchen table for a service experts company in Ottawa to working as a territory manager directly with a contractor network with Daikin, and eventually taking on the role with MechCan in the director of business development role, where I talk to contractors near and far about what their options are in terms of potentially selling their business or a portion of their business. And so we together have put some questions for one another that we're going to ask, as Matthew said, in a sort of fireside chat format. We encourage any questions that you might have for you to enter them in as well. But in the meantime, we'll take it away. So my first question is a very broad question, and I'm going to turn it over to Spencer. But I would like to know, sort of in your, from your perspective, what is succession planning? What can we tell the audience today about how this all works?
Thanks. And just before we jump too far in, obviously the camera adds 20 pounds. And this is not a super dynamic format. We are awesome, dynamic people, but so please do ask any questions at any time. But anytime you're talking about something, I think it's important to define what is the thing that you're talking about. So what is succession planning? So it's basically what's going to happen to the business after the current management or owner operator moves on. Father Time is undefeated. So for all businesses out there, HVAC or otherwise, there will be a time after the current owner operator or CEO or general manager sort of moves on. And succession planning is doing all of the things in advance of that to be ready for when that general manager, CEO, whoever it is, moves on, whether that's through sale or retirement or otherwise. You know, Nike has a succession plan, General Electric has a succession plan. This isn't a sort of field or area that's unique to small or medium-sized businesses. I also think it's important to note, obviously, people like us do these webinars to get it out there that we're available to buy businesses. At the same time, selling your business is not the only option in the succession planning toolkit. So, you know, with that in mind, what are the general type of things that people talk about for succession planning? Obviously, there's, you know, grooming or creating a next level of management that can, you know, succeed you. You know, so that can be a general manager or service manager that's ready to step up into the next role. It could be an HCA, just whoever's actually willing and, you know, oftentimes more importantly, able to take on the important role that the owner operator is often filling. There's as well sort of intergenerational transfer, having a kid or family member in the business that someone's passed to. And then obviously it's sort of most relevant for us in our fireside chat is selling the business to a third party. So, you know, that's what we're talking about. I think ultimately it's important to note that everyone has a succession plan, whether they're aware of it or not. Some people's succession plan is simply not having a plan. And, you know, our advice would be it's always better to have some idea of what you're going to do and prepare for that outcome. It doesn't necessarily have to be a sale. So with that in mind, why is this topic we're talking about important, Kaylie?
Yeah, good question. It is obviously relevant to anybody who is wanting to eventually sail off into the sunset, but I'm going to speak on a personal note for a minute and tell you a little bit about why it's important to me, sort of with some history from my family. So as I mentioned earlier, I grew up in the business. My parents owned a heating and cooling company, and it was in a pretty rural area. And frankly, there was not a well thought out succession plan in place. The idea was that maybe myself or one of my family members would eventually take over. There was also an option that some of the key personnel within the organization might take over, but there truly wasn't a concrete plan in place. And I think that, you know, in meeting with contractor owner operators regularly, as Spencer and I do, what we're finding is that that's quite common. You know, that it was not unique to my parents in any way, shape, or form. We see it very regularly, that it isn't something that is well thought out. I mean, you've got so many other things going on in your day to day. You know, you're putting out fires with, you know, homeowners and your employees alike, and so it's just not something that maybe we are putting enough time and focus into. And it certainly wasn't in my family's case. So what ended up happening in my family's case is they sold to essentially someone from outside the industry who didn't have a lot of experience, and they took a reasonably large, well-run and successful company, and sort of piece by piece chipped it away into to be a much smaller organization, which is fine. It seems to be working for what they're looking what they're looking to do with it, but it was never the intention of the company. And I really believe that there was a lack of legacy preservation for that company in the market that it was in. And so part of what inspired me in the very first place, I'm sort of deviating here, but that's the point of a fireside chat. Part of what inspired me in the first place to join MechCan was that I really saw we were offering a solution for owner operators, not unlike my parents, who perhaps didn't have a plan and could have used something like one of the unique sort of tailor-made strategies that we offer for contractors. Anyway, so it's something that's super personal to me. It is important to have a plan in place. I saw what happened in my family's instance when they didn't have a plan in place. Now let me be clear, they're happily retired. Things have gone well for them, but it would have been nice to see the company carry on the same legacy that they had built all of the years in that small community. And so I think whether it's something that's, my personal experience or something that could be, a family legacy in your own case, or, an outside party, having all of the sort of I's dotted and T's crossed and having a plan in place is going to be really critical to ensuring your smooth transition into someday, as I said, sailing off into the sunset. Okay, so my next question for Spencer is, what what does all of this mean for contractors who might be listening on this call? We anticipate that a lot of our viewers today are going to be owner operators who have come here to, seek some value as to, what they can expect and what this could mean for them. So can you touch on that?
Thanks, Kaylee. That's a great question that wasn't rehearsed. I also appreciate your looking at me and not sticking directly forward. So thank you very much. Yeah, so what I think it means for us and the people on the call, let's first take a step back and talk about what the Canadian HVAC industry is like and the type of companies that are in it. So HRAI will be much better suited to have the actual numbers, but I think there are 15,000 or something HVAC contractors across Canada, the overwhelming majority of which are, 1, 2, 3, 4-person companies, right? And they're going to have options that are wildly different from the, 10 technician companies, 20 technician companies, and then obviously the 30, 40, 50 technician companies after that. So I think maybe to sort of have the most productive conversation would sort of frame it in, small, medium, and large size companies, which obviously for Canada, just given the population density, generally speaking, means smaller companies to begin with than elsewhere where other people sort of confront these succession planning issues. So for smaller organizations in smaller towns, across Ontario and otherwise, you're probably looking at options that are much less gravitated towards a sale transaction. Buyers, financial buyers, even, the company down the street, they're really thinking about, things from a perspective of, I can give you, a bunch of money for your business, or I can, attempt to recreate that type of business myself, and just how much is it worth paying you for your business. Those smaller companies, generally speaking, also tend to have sort of less repeatable processes in place. They're more dependent on the owner operator. There's just less there that's transferable to a buyer to actually pay for. So in those situations for smaller businesses, you're talking about, is there someone in the business that I can pass it to? Is there a family member that wants to take it over? What are my options in terms of how I can structure a transaction? Can I get any cash for it? Can I, get the value of my truck? Do I have to liquidate assets? Like what are the things that actually drive, the check I can ultimately get for my business, whether that's from an outside buyer. And your outside buyer universe is usually limited to people who either want to expand into your service area that already have a business nearby, want to sort of do like a additional branch, or someone that's in a related but tangential field like plumbing or electrical that wants to pick up HVAC. So that's sort of what I would think of as the succession planning toolkit for those type of businesses. For sort of the more medium-sized players, you start to get into a territory where you are talking about potentially being able to sell. I think it's important to really know your numbers in that case and be prepared for a sale. And so that means sort of doing all the things that are going to make your business attractive to a buyer, whether that's your employee or whether that's someone sort of outside. Finally, you do have sort of the larger businesses in the space, and then they're talking about, all of those same options, but candidly, you start to run into areas where your employees or family members become less attractive because they may not be able to write you the check that you deserve for the business and for all the value that you've created sort of along the way. So I think in order to sort of best be prepared to create a succession plan, you have to have an honest conversation with yourself about sort of where do I fit and what are the levers that I can pull, or what are the tools that are sort of available to me in my toolkit. And that really dictates sort of where the conversation can go. And that's very different for sort of our industry relative to others, especially in Canada, just based on sort of the size of the businesses. So I'll go ahead and sort of keep going on this non-rehearsed list. What can people do in their businesses sort of today or immediately after this webinar? Don't leave.
Yeah.
What can people do to prepare or start their succession planning to the extent they haven't done so already?
Right. Yeah. I mean, honestly, Spencer sort of touched on some of these topics, but we're meeting with contractors regularly, and we're seeing, you know, everyone has their own software system, whether you're on Service Titan or Aptora. Some people have a fleet management program in place. Some people are buying trucks sort of as needed. So whether it's software or fleet management, all the systems and processes that you can have in place today are obviously going to be helpful when it is finally time to turn over the company and to whichever path it is that you decide to go. Things that we value and look for regularly are those types of um, you know companies that are doing routine employee training. Are your all of your technicians up to date with things? Are your home comfort advisors following a sales process? Is there a sales manager or somebody within the team who's coaching them and doing check-ins in terms of understanding where did our numbers fall this week? And really just sort of working within the organization, whether it's people, whether it's equipment, working with an OEM, what type of equipment deals are structured, and is there opportunity for you know for refining processes within the company. So essentially we're looking at as a whole, everything from A to Z within a company, that is required to make the company tick. That it's been well thought out and well executed, and um, is continuously being what's the word I'm looking for here? Improved upon. Yes, thank you. Yeah, so essentially, in a nutshell, that would be what we're looking for. And as I said, when we're talking to contractors regularly, like hopefully like some of the people that are on this conversation, we see a really wide variety of that. And you sort of made this point, from the smaller companies to the bigger companies. But maybe you can touch a little bit on, what the actual value in a small company is or isn't in this case, and how those people might not, have the planned exit that they might think they do when there's only a guy and say two trucks or something like that.
Sure, guy or woman.
Oh, yeah,
But,
or a
yeah.
woman, yeah.
But yeah, so I think the important thing is often when you get into these succession planning webinars, you're talking about profit or EBITDA or multiples, and that's all interesting. But practically speaking, for us, like, are you running a good company, right? And sort of good succession planning is often just good business practices that don't necessarily involve, like, what do I need to do to be able to hire an accountant or a broker, or call Spencer after the webinar and get as much money or as big a check as I can as possible, right? If you're doing what we consider a lot of sort of industry best practices, you are sort of preparing your business for the next generation, regardless of whether you're sort of intentionally, quote unquote, purposefully succession planning. So, Kaylie touched on some of this, but like, do you have a software in place that has documented systems and processes? Like, when a call comes in to your CSO, your customer service rep, like, do they know if you've been to the house before? Do they know if it's a super old, piece of equipment with R22? Just, do they know, are they able to sort of dispatch for profit, right? Like, these are the things that create value in a business, and also make your business transferable to a buyer, whether it's us or another buyer, right? Ultimately, people are going to pay you a multiple of your cash flow because they believe they're going to get that cash flow back and more over time. So you're really trying to figure out, or you're really trying to set up your business to be as predictable as possible and generate cash flow year after year after year, with or without you. If you go on vacation and the business falls apart for a month, that's probably not the best thing for your succession planning. And there are a ton of, depending on the size of your business, examples like this beyond sort of software or systems and processes. But do you have, home comfort advisors? Do you have a diversity of sales leads? Do you have Google reviews? Do you have the type of things that, it's not just Jim who knows you from the grocery store who's calling you because they have your personal cell phone number, to get a new AC, right? Those are the type of businesses, regardless of whether it's us, that just are not transferable for a large amount of money to another buyer, even if it's your own employee. Your own employee is not going to pay you sort of like wildly more than the business is worth. So I think it's just important, we can focus on the financial and transaction oriented aspects of this, but ultimately the type of things that are good for succession, good for setting yourself up for the next generation, we also just consider good housekeeping, or good things for, or good best practices for making sure your business is running as sustainably and profitably as possible. So I think with that, I know we didn't rehearse this, but I think that's the end of our own sort of questions for ourselves. I see we have a couple questions from the audience. So Matthew, if maybe you can.
Hi.
Yeah.
Hey,
Perfect.
thanks so much, guys. Apologies for the giant spotlight on my face. I have no idea what's going on there, but
You're
we're all
glowing.
dealing with
Yeah.
we're all dealing with the tech. So yeah, we did have some questions sent to us before the webinar and during, but and you might have touched on these already in your conversation, but I just kind of want to level set. What is a realistic timeline to sell a business if you're approaching that process?
You want to take this one?
Yeah, I can
Perfect.
take that one. Good question, and I think the answer is that it's probably longer than you anticipate, but we also have the ability to get things done quickly if there's motivation on both sides.
Mhm.
You know, Spencer and I always say we will never be the ones to hold up a deal if there's a genuine interest in getting things done. I mean, 60 days could be a realistic timeline by the time we go through financial due diligence, illegal, so on and so forth. But that being
Legal, not illegal.
yes,
Yeah.
legal, yes, legal.
Legal.
But there's also I feel compelled to say there's the more realistic timeline, and we can see deals kind of from inception, the day we meet with with a prospect, right through until the day the deal closes, that sort of 4 to maybe even 6 month timeline, being probably a bit more realistic.
Mhm.
Again, it will never be on our end that things would be held up, but there's a lot of moving pieces. There's also a lot of emotion involved in something like this when somebody is you know deciding to take a step back and leave their legacy in the capable hands of someone new. There's a lot
Mhm.
of sort of emotions that go through and that person's mind, and we have a lot of friendships that develop over that time, and coaching and
Mhm.
counseling and so on. So I would say that's sort of one side of it. The other side of it is, a timeline in terms of when somebody is ready. And so, what I think has been a surprise to me, in this role is when Spencer and I first chatted about what this role would look like, it
Mhm.
was sort of, my impression, I will say, was, I'm going to be meeting with people who are late career, 60, 65 years old. They're ready to, sail off into the sunset and,
Mhm.
hand over the keys to somebody else. But what we're finding more and more is there's a lot of opportunities with people who are more midterm, who are looking for a plan today that will give them some assurance in the future. So maybe that's
Mhm.
3 years from now or 5 years from now. And so when we talk about timelines, the transaction might be able to be done in 60 days or up to 6 months. But realistically, we're finding with a lot of, sort of our partnership acquisitions that we have long-term, relationships that are coming out of this where someone's going to stay on and continue, operating the business the way they have been successfully to date. So timeline can kind of look like two different things in that sense. Is there anything you want to add to that or?
No, I think that's great.
I like what you mentioned about the emotions of the process because we talk a lot about the technical steps and the valuations and all that stuff. But can you speak a little bit to that point about, what happens when people aren't ready to let go, or what happens when people are like, now is the time, but there's people holding on. Like, how do you manage that
Yeah, so
process?
I'll jump in. Just you
Mhm.
took the last one, so only fair.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I can only speak to this in terms of what my experience has been over the
Mhm.
8 or so deals we've done over the past couple years. I think there's sort of a few decision points, and the emotions are different along the way. There's I think first, almost like the practical hat sets in. I'm a certain age, or I'm trying to tackle this problem, and I think someone like MechCan or another acquirer could help. And you sort of go through the like preparing your business for sale, collecting either offers or interests or whatever, and you don't really you haven't internalized like, oh my God, I'm going to show up to work one day and like not be either the boss or not be in charge or like really hand over my baby. And so
Hmm.
you get to that stage, you pick someone you think you like, you go through this sort of, now there's accounting diligence and legal diligence and contract writing and all that stuff. And hopefully, you begin to trust and like that person more and more and more. And so you're sort of building up the emotional bank of trust, so to speak,
Hmm.
because there'll be hiccups along the way. And then right at the very, very end, every seller that we've encountered has this like, and pardon the French, like, oh shit moment of like, I'm selling my business. Like, am
Hmm.
I ready to do this? And there's emotional phone calls, there's in-person meetings. And that's sort of the thing that, everyone I think processes and internalizes a bit differently.
Hmm.
Our goal uh, as a company and, personally as often the front person going through the transaction process with someone is to create enough trust in that trust bank that people feel good. I want to sell my business to this person. I trust that they're going to do the right thing with it. I've seen what they've done with the other businesses. They do what they say they're going to do. And
Hmm.
there are contracts and everything that can lay out sort of all of these things, but it's really until that, you know, oh shit moment happens that you go through, all of the emotions of truly selling your business. And it feels like in some way that's when the emotional decision is truly, truly made. And
Hmm.
that's, I think it's important. It's almost natural that you have this, not 1 week process of I met someone and I'm selling because that you don't really know the person. And so I think getting reps, going through disagreements, whatever it is, learning things about the business is actually a really good preparation tool for feeling good that the person or corporation or whomever you're selling to
Hmm.
is the right fit for you and will help you sort of hopefully get over the hump if that's what you want of actually selling your business. But what we find is the emotional roller coaster doesn't really happen until the very end.
Where it gets real.
It
Yeah.
gets real.
Yeah.
Awesome. Let's dip back into the technical. We do have a question from one of our audience members. Outside of EBITDA multiples, how do you value those other factors in valuing a business? For instance, online reputation, customer acquisition costs, amount of maintenance customers, business processes in place, website quality, etc. So I guess the intangibles, maybe.
Go ahead.
Okay. I know I had two in a row. A little bit unfair. But so I think the simplest answer in some way is all of those intangibles should be things that lead to cash flow. So the reason cash flow multiples are important to buyers is it's essentially a proxy for like how long is it going to take me to get my money back, right? If I give you 3, 4, 5, 20, 50 times your cash flow, it's going to take me, that many years to get my money back. And that's in some way very much a related factor to how predictable or how assured am I that that cash flow is going to happen year after year after year. And so all of those, some tangible and some intangible factors that lead to the predictability of that cash flow sort of get valued essentially in the multiple. So like a business with, you know, 50/50 service and install that has thousands of service plans at, 19.99 a month and 3,000 Google reviews. And, they rank number one on Google, but they also have, 20%, just every year from their existing customers. And, they know that they got this many service plan customers with 10-year-old equipment. That's going to be a higher multiple business than a business that has 3 big customers and, 1 year they do 10 and the next year they do 4 and the year after that they do 12. So a little bit of the answer is it's what it's not like the answer is 4.4 and then you value intangible on top of that or how many, and every Google review is worth $10. It's not that type of thing. It's sort of more a back and forth of, personally, I'm willing to pay more for a business that has all of those factors, which translates into a higher multiple range, still often within the like industry standard or accepted range of multiples, but the question often my partner, since he's the more difficult of the two of us, will ask is, if everything's so great, then why don't you have more cash flow coming in? Or if you can't see how great the business is from the numbers, and you're not committing tax fraud, then why isn't it better? It should just be translating. And so I think there are things, you call them normalizations, that can translate into cash flow would be this, but I bought season tickets, or I bought 3 trucks, or renovated my cottage, or whatever type of thing. Those are different. But ultimately the most direct answer is, it leads into the multiple that someone's willing to pay, because it makes the cash flow more predictable, which is ultimately what a buyer is looking for.
Right. On the topic of predictability, what are some common pitfalls or just surprises that can pop up, and how do you kind of address those succession planning issues?
Um, hmm.
You want me to go?
Yeah, okay.
No.
No, you
Go.
go. I'm gonna
Okay.
think on it for a minute.
Okay, so look at, like, as Kaylee mentioned, it can be sort of a multi-month process. From 1 p.m. everyone calling us immediately after because they want to sell us their business, to actually getting a check, right? So, along the way, a lot of things are going to happen. Just in terms of you guys running your businesses sort of day to day, and as we're all aware from actually running these businesses, there are a ton of hiccups. So, I mean, one example from our real life was, there was a number 2 level employee that we expected to sort of was part of the quote unquote succession plan from the owner, that was going to retire over a couple year time frame, who quit 2 weeks before the deal was supposed to close. So, like,
Mhm.
employee retention is probably one of the biggest sort of real hiccup issues. The other can be having a bad couple months right before the deal closes. Obviously rebates have gone, like, there's a bunch of factors that are happening now that, from what we've seen, have led to sort of softer revenue growth, or in a lot of cases, sort of revenues declining. And basically, these are all the type of pitfalls that come up towards a seller. A seller, when they meet with us and we say, hey, we're going to pay X, one of the most important parts, especially towards when you get to the end of that emotional roller coaster, is like, okay, you told me 10, am I actually going to get $10? Another big pitfall is working capital adjustments and counting inventory. And so one of the things we find, and you often wouldn't necessarily get this advice from a buyer who wants to transact with you directly, but being prepared, having knowledge, even speaking to a broker, is the type of thing that can really be helpful towards avoiding some of these pitfalls. Like, most of us in our everyday basis aren't dealing with working capital adjustments. What inventory can be recognized? How can it be valued on the balance sheet? Do I have to take a write down? How does that affect my purchase price, right? And so all of these things come up, and they can lead to sort of scrabbles, because ultimately it affects the amount of cash in someone's jeans at the end of the transaction. And so I think preparation and open communication is the best way to sort of deal with these things that are just very naturally and unavoidably, something is going to come up over the course of a couple of months. And then
Mhm.
I think the final part of that would be knowing your buyer, and having a realistic price. Like, if you just want to absolutely maximize dollars, you can have there are a ton of pretenders. Everyone says they want to buy an HVAC company, and then everyone I talk to says they have 3 people who are talking to them, aside from me, who want to buy their HVAC company. And you know do they have the money? Are they just gonna, like, are they gonna flash a big price at you, and then show you, oh well, Brent quit and your inventory is too low, and then, like, all of a sudden you get
Mhm.
back to the number that I told you I would have paid anyway, right? So I think being prepared, and brokers are actually really, they've been through a transaction, so you can have the assurance that, like, what, it's not just me telling you, like, oh, this is normal, or this is what happens. Like, you have that uninterested, or semi-interested third party sort of actually guiding through the transaction. That type of stuff can help. But pitfall, like, things go wrong, installs go wrong, like
Mhm.
it's just, stuff happens all the time, and it's unavoidable. And so building, we we highly believe in creating the bank of trust so that when these pitfalls come up, you can sort of pull from your bank and know, you're getting the right outcome that way. And hopefully in all that babbling,
Yeah.
were you thinking of anything better to
No,
say?
no, I mean, all I was going to say, and I think I already have said it, is when I touched on timeline earlier, the 6 weeks or 6 months sort of timeline is a testament to that, right? Things are going to come up, and but as Spencer said, with all of our transactions to date, and certainly, our hope always is that there's a good enough relationship there to get through them.
Fantastic. Thanks, guys. I hear the word trust pop up a lot in our conversations, and it really is like that trust on all sides, right?
Mhm.
It's integral to the process. Um, I had a couple more questions for you, but I think we covered them. What is my business worth? That's a complicated question that you're going to find out through that process, obviously, right?
Yeah.
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 Um, oh, um, Now I would encourage anyone, while we still have some time left, to pop your questions in the Q&A button there or chat. Otherwise, any kind of last parting words of wisdom from you guys?
I don't know about words of wisdom, but I'm happy to fill some time in case the questions were really helpful to making this more natural. So really appreciate it. Thank you guys for submitting them. I obviously we're here because there's some potential that there's someone on this call whose business we'd like to buy or who will see this. Matthew assures me this is going to live forever on YouTube. So maybe 10 years down the line, someone
It
will see
is.
this and give me.
And the camera will have added more pounds by then,
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
I'll be skinnier by then.
The new
But
AI technology. Yeah.
but look, like succession planning, it's not just transaction oriented. There are a lot of options. In Ontario, people who've been talking to us have also been looking at joining a purchasing co-op. Like there are just a number of different ways that you can skin this cat, a lot of which are dependent on the size of your business, in terms of whether you'll be sort of naturally gravitating towards a sale type transaction. We're happy to provide free advice is often worth what you pay for it, but we're always happy to provide a look what we think it might be worth, whether we think you're a candidate, what other options might be available to you, even if you just want to structure something with your own employees, like how can you go about doing that. We want to be in this industry for a long time. We want to keep the Canadian skilled trades Canadian, sort of stop some of the consolidation momentum that has led to business practices that we don't necessarily agree with, and customers being treated in ways that we don't necessarily agree with. And so we want to be a resource in whatever way we can and with whatever little or amount of expertise we have. And so it's just important that this isn't always going to lead towards a transaction or a sale. But there are a lot of things that you can, and in our opinion, should be doing, whether you're 35 or 65, to sort of prepare your business so that you have predictable cash flow year after year after year that you can invest in other things if you want to. And that'll ultimately make your business, more valuable and make it a candidate more for us or someone like us. But succession planning is just good business. It isn't just about, okay, I'm at this age, I gotta prepare. And it's really helpful for employees want to trade hours for dollars, and they want to know that there's a paycheck. So you'll have better employee retention. And they don't look at someone and say, oh, that guy is getting older, I just got $1 more per hour offer from someone down the street. Like, is this company going to be here in 2 years? Right. So it's yes, we're here because we're MechCan, we want to buy businesses, but we also just want to do what's right for us and our industry. And so if there's any way we can help, more than happy to sort of do so. And there are a lot of great options, obviously, beyond just selling. And so unless a lot of questions have come in, I know we got a lot of good ones. Really do appreciate the time, those of you that have joined, those of you that will have joined when I'm skinnier in the future. And yeah, please do reach out. I think Kaylee is going to flash the
Yeah.
contact info, but
Yeah.
any closing comments
No,
from you?
similar, echo Spencer's remarks. Thank you for your time. I'm gonna put up some contact information here. Hopefully there's some, new contractors on the call we haven't yet had a chance to connect with, who would be interested in reaching out. As Spencer said, a lot of times it's just a conversation. And for those of you who are on the call who we have met, thank you for participating, but we'll put our information up here and we'd love to chat.
Perfect.
Okay.
You guys
awesome.
did my job for me. So yeah, absolutely. You can find this on HRI's YouTube page. And if you'd like to be a Kaylie or Spencer on the screen, reach out to HRI and we can get a webinar started for you as well on a thought leadership topic. So there they are. Reach out with any further questions. But until then, I really want to thank you guys for taking time out of your day to join us and provide some really good insights.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much for everyone for attending, and we'll see you next time. Cheers.